Hello everyone and welcome back to Dash of Annie. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this delicious maple salmon salad. If you already follow me on TikTok or Instagram, you might have already seen this recipe for my maple salmon salad. And today I just thought I'd go through that recipe again, but instead I've added a few more veggies that were in season. If one of your goals for this year is to eat healthier, this recipe is going to be perfect for you. For this recipe, you're going to need salmon, maple syrup, olive oil, soy sauce, garlic, salt and pepper, kale, Brussels sprouts, butternut squash, sweet potato, zucchini, red pepper, onion, parsnips, oregano, basil, garlic powder, paprika, quinoa, and goat cheese. Let's get started with the marinade you'll add to your salmon. You'll need 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, half a cup of maple syrup, 2 cloves of minced garlic, half of a teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Whisk that together really well in the bowl, and this marinade is so delicious. It's the perfect combination of both sweet and salty. I've had friends come over for dinner who say they don't like salmon, but after they try my salmon that's marinated so wonderfully, they change their minds completely. If your salmon isn't already cut into single servings, I'd recommend cutting them before you marinate them. It's just gonna get that flavor all over all the sides of the salmon. Because I find it quite tough to cut through that salmon skin, I usually just slice a line right through the salmon so I know approximately how large I want the pieces to be, and then what I'll do is I'll cut through any final tougher pieces with some kitchen scissors. Next, get a casserole dish and add your marinade to the dish. The reason I use a casserole dish instead of a baking sheet is that I want the marinade to sort of rise up over the sides of the salmon when I place it in. This is really going to help your salmon completely absorb the flavor of the marinade. Make sure your marinade is spread around the pan evenly before you add your salmon, and then add your salmon skin side up. Or if you have skinless salmon, it doesn't really matter which side you put it on because we'll be flipping it over again later. Drizzle some of the marinade over the skin side of your salmon before you put it in the fridge. Let this marinate in the fridge for at least 30 minutes, and that should be about the same amount of time it'll take you to prep the rest of your veggies for this dish. Next up, let's prep our kale. Believe it or not, this was the very first time I've ever prepped kale. I've eaten it before, but I've never actually washed it or chopped it in my life. So I read some tips online, and one of those tips recommended washing your kale in an ice bath to remove any of the kale's bitterness. Now, I'm not sure if it removed any bitterness or not, but it was a very good way to get rid of any dirt that might have been in between the leaves. Once your leaves are nice and clean, give them one final rinse before you chop them up. When you go to chop your kale, just fold it in half and you're going to slice it just along that stem there. I believe you can eat the stems of kale, but I've heard they're tough and chewy, so I've just removed them from the kale. Once your kale is all chopped up, give it another rinse under cold water and then put it in a salad spinner to get that liquid out. Let's chop up the rest of our vegetables. I chopped off the bottom of the sprouts and then chopped off any parts that were a bit damaged, and finally I chopped them in half. For this salad, I really wanted to use vegetables that were in season. So for me, as someone who lives in Ontario in Canada, and it being January, these were just some of the vegetables that were in season at the time. If you live in another part of the world or you're watching this in a different season, Feel free to use whatever vegetables you can bake and you like and are maybe in season for you. For the zucchini, remove the top off and the bottom, slice it in half, and then slice them about a 1/2 inch thick. For your red pepper, I like to cut mine in half from the top and go all the way around. And then I just pull the pepper in half and remove the stem. Then I remove any seeds or ribs until the peppers are nice and clean. Slice each piece in half again, and then chop them about 1 inch thick. Next up, let's prep our parsnips. Peel your parsnips the same way you'd peel a carrot. Then chop off both ends. I really love the taste of parsnips, so I was really excited to add them to the salad. I think they go really well with the maple sweetness, and it makes the whole salad taste really good. Since the parsnips take a bit longer to cook, I've just chopped them up into very tiny pieces. Peel the skin off your sweet potato and get rid of any spots that might have dirt in them. Then chop your potatoes into 1 inch cubes. Again, the sweet potato is gonna go so well with that sweetness of the maple syrup from your salmon. Next, peel and dice an onion into large chunks. Since onions don't take too long to cook, you want those pieces to be quite large. I've just used a yellow onion, but you could go ahead and use a red onion or a white onion. And finally, chop up your butternut squash. Remove the top and the bottom. Since butternut squashes can be pretty tough to cut, you can cut off the side just a bit and then use that to stabilize as you cut the butternut squash in half. Remove the seeds from your butternut squash with a spoon. You can remove the skin of your butternut squash with a vegetable peeler. And once the skin is removed, dice it into chunks. The squash that I used here was a bit underripe. I wish I had let it ripen a little longer, or I could have cut it into much smaller chunks. After it cooked in the oven, it was still a little tough, so I'd recommend cutting it into smaller pieces or letting it cook a bit earlier than the rest of your vegetables. Drizzle your vegetables in olive oil, and then we're going to add our seasonings. Add a teaspoon of basil, a teaspoon of oregano, a teaspoon of garlic powder, and a teaspoon of paprika. Then add a dash of salt and pepper to taste. Mix up your vegetables really well to ensure each one is coated evenly with that oil and all of your seasonings. Next, we're gonna cook up our quinoa. I just followed the package instructions that were on my bag of quinoa, so I recommend you do that as well. I've added 4 cups of water and brought that to a boil. Then I added 1/2 cup of quinoa to the boiling water and let that cook on low heat for 14 minutes. While that was cooking, I added my vegetables to a sheet pan. These vegetables were a bit too much for 1 sheet pan, so I decided to transfer it to 2 sheet pans. If you don't want as many vegetables, you could cut out the butternut squash as it took up most of the roasted vegetables. I wish I had saved 1/2 of that butternut squash for a soup. I make really good butternut squash soup. I should make a video on it one day. Even though this was a lot of vegetables, it did make for some really delicious leftovers. Before you put your vegetables in the oven, take out your salmon and just flip them over. Spoon the marinade over top your salmon just to make sure all that flavor is gonna get baked right into it. Then you're going to bake your salmon and your vegetables at the same time. I have a convection oven, so I was able to put them all in on different racks, but if you don't, I'd recommend putting your salmon on the sheet pan that your vegetables are on and just drizzle all of that marinade over top everything. Bake your vegetables and your salmon at 400 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. When your quinoa is done cooking, strain it in a small meshed strainer. Then put your quinoa aside to cool. While your salmon and your vegetables are baking in the oven, grab a large tray or serving dish and place your kale as a bed at the bottom. I know you can buy goat cheese that's pre-crumbled, but I couldn't find any of that, so if you've got a block of goat cheese like I did, you can just chop that up into smaller pieces, since we're going to be using that to sprinkle over top of our salad. I really love the taste of goat cheese in any salad, but if you're not the biggest fan of goat cheese, you are welcome to use any cheese you like. I'd even recommend maybe some feta cheese. When your vegetables are done, bring them out of the oven and plate them on top of your kale. Add your cooked quinoa on top of your roasted vegetables. Then place your salmon on top of the quinoa. If you'd prefer, you could also plate this individually for each person on their own plate. With a tablespoon, spoon out the marinade from your casserole dish, and you're going to drizzle that all over the salad. Make sure you drizzle it not only on your salmon, but on the vegetables and quinoa as much as you can to get that flavor really spread consistently throughout. And finally, top it all off with your goat cheese. And now you have a delicious maple salmon salad. This recipe is enough to serve up to 4 people. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more food inspiration. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.